To me, he was the finest player that I've ever seen in a Hearts jersey.
It's a thing that he'll always be remembered, you know.
Holyrood may have been the home of kings, but the one most revered in Edinburgh had his seat a couple of miles to the west, at Tynecastle. Willie Bauld reigned over Hearts from 1946 to 1962. None of their players, before or since, has left such a cherished memory. He was an extraordinary footballer, touched apparently by a sense of humility which further endeared him to his thousands of admirers. It is fitting testament to both the player and the personality that long after his death in 1977, his name is preserved and celebrated annually by the Willie Bauld Memorial Club. William Russell Logan Bauld was born in New Craighall in 1928 and, once signed by Hearts, served spells with Newton Grange Star and Edinburgh City before beginning to inspire his own legend and that of the Terrible Trio. Con, Bauld and Wardhaw played a first time together in October 1948 against East Fife at Tynecastle, with Willie scoring a hat-trick. Beginner's luck? Hardly. Willie followed up his debut by scoring another 3 goals against Queen of the South in Hearts' next match. The man who would be King of Hearts had made a regal start to a career which finally yielded 356 goals in 510 appearances, a record surpassed only by that of one of his arch accomplices, Jimmy Wardhaw. He scored 375 goals in 517 matches. The laughable thing was that Willie Bauld was said to be lazy, a criticism to which his manager, the late Tommy Walker, gave, well, just a little credence by saying once, "I know he could occasionally give the impression of being, how can we put it, unindustrious."
He was lazy, but if somebody always had been on his toes, as I was telling you, I mean, he was a lazy, even at training. Willie would go at the back of the field, he was quite happy to jog along round the park, and the trainer never bothered him, you know, he just let him. But when he was on that park on a Saturday, he did his job, you know. But, oh no, I mean, with a good trainer, I think part of our success was our trainer, John Harvey, you know, when he trained the managerial side, I think that was his downfall, pressure, you know. I think he was a brilliant coach, and he had you at a peak where, you know, you didn't go and then you dropped. You went there and you held your, you know, what they call this peak. But I think he was he was the Hearts, what they call the main man. He was in the army and things like that, and I think he had everything all to a T, you know, where the fitness angle played a big part in our team. There weren't any teams fitter than ours, as you know. I'm talking about, and we used you know, the skills and the ability of the forwards, and it played a big part in Hearts' success. If you've not got an engine room, you've got nothing. You know, I mean, it's all right saying you've got 4 men now, but that doesn't mean to say, you know, it doesn't matter why you've got 4. You've got to be able to get that ball, you know, to people that's got to do the necessary.
No, I could never say that Willie was lazy. He was deceptive, very deceptive. Insofar he could take a centre half out of position very easily by going to the wings, either wing. Now, you just can't do that and be lazy. So he could drag them away for the likes of Con and Morton to do that. No, I would say he was deceiving. Just the way he moved, but I would never say he was lazy. He was too clever to be lazy. He was too clever. He could take up position, and Morton Con they knew he was there, and they could turn the other way, and they knew Willie would be right on there if they crossed the ball and or anything like that, you know.
What was his biggest strength, do you think?
Heading the ball. heading the ball. When a ball come across at any time in the box at Tynecastle, they left it to Willie. He was there and he could place it. He just didn't go in and blindly head the ball. He placed it when he was heading it, you know. Could place it any angle, depending on where he was standing and received the cross. I would say that was his greatest asset. And he was never scared of going in there. Didn't matter who the centre half was. He would still go in against them, you know.
He was called the King of Hearts. Why him? Why not Conn? Why not Wardhaw? Why not Cummings? Why Willie?
Because Willie always seemed to be the guy that was there to finish everything they had done, you know. Or, having said that, he was the brains as well. I mean, they were brilliant inside forward, the two of them. And a lot of people thought they were the brainy guys, but it was actually Willie, because he could take the positions up. And I think people recognised this. Willie will be there to finish it off. Though having said that, Jimmy Wardhaw scored more goals than Willie Bauld in their days at Tynecastle, funnily enough. But he was what you call a wee poacher. He fed off of Willie, because Willie would head them down to, if he couldn't head them into the net himself, he would head it down to Jimmy, and Jimmy would have it in. Either that or on the deck, do the same thing. Put it out to Alfie Conn, and when Alfie Conn hit a ball, it was going in. In fact, it used to be debated in Edinburgh who could strike a ball harder, was Alfie Conn or Eddie Turnbull of Hibs. Actually, I think that's how the people recognise Willie, you know, because he could do things that some other players just couldn't think, and therefore he wasn't lazy, he was deceptive. That's the word I would describe Willie Bauld as, being deceptive.
But opposing defenders could not afford to be lazy, as he drifted deceptively right and left with the ball at his feet, or leapt majestically for it in the air. His gifts overshadowed his weaknesses to the degree that Tommy Walker described him as a great player, wonderful really. And Willie himself challenged any question of his application by saying that with a family to support, he could not afford to be anything less than honest and wholehearted in his approach to football.
Willie wasn't the best of trainers, you know. I mean, I trained with Willie, and Willie always was at the back of the field, you know. But I mean, that was his nature. I mean, Willie was a very shy person, you know. I mean, you get to know him, you know, and I used to pick him up, and everything about him was, his wife had a cup of tea ready for him. He would come down the stair and things like that, you know. And he was mollycoddled, you know. But he was at 10 when he went on to football park. He changed if somebody actually had, you know, I'm talking about give him a bit, you know, a bit stick, you know, like Willie Telfer or Willie Woodburn. That's when Willie Bauld rose his game, you know. But he wasn't the best of trainers, you know. He was away at the back of the field and the rest of the lads were up front. That was just you couldn't change him. Very nice, and you never heard them arguing or nothing, you know. But if somebody actually had a dig at him, you know, we always hoped that when you were playing against a centre half, he would, you know. He was a great lad. He had brilliant balance. He was good in the ball. He could hit a ball. He could bring a ball down. He could head the ball to people. He had that many strengths in his, you know, his football ability. But I know, I mean, he was. Nobody could say anything bad about him, you know. But he was very shy. That was the big thing.
Midlothian in dark shirts kick off at Tynecastle against Aberdeen. Both teams have suffered recently with injuries, but are at full strength for this needle match. In the first few minutes, Leggett throws in for the Dons. Teammate Buckley outpaces Glidden, and Hearts are in danger. A wonderful save by Duff, but he can't stop the corner. Leggett takes it, and Hearts are in trouble. McAllister heads, and Duff's beaten. Aberdeen draw first blood. Duff faces Buckley but keeps the net clear. Duff's playing a great game despite that early setback. Away go Hearts to try and crack the Dons' determined defence. Young tackles and robs Urquhart of a chance. Half-time comes with honours, if not the score, just about even. Aberdeen soon have a corner after the resumption, but the Hearts defence gets it away and out to Souness, number 7 on the wing. Smith intercepts, but it's a corner to Hearts. Appropriately, it's Souness who takes it. Goalie Martin touches it, but Alistair clears to safety. But it's not safe for long. Souness lobs it to Bauld, who cracks it into the net to level the score. Hearts set out for another, and again it's Souness who takes up the running. In the second half, it's Hearts nearly all the way, but try as they will, they don't seem able to get it past Aberdeen's defenders. Souness takes a corner, but there's still nothing doing. And 1-1 is the final score, so Hearts and Aberdeen will meet again.
I played for various school teams, you know, and he progressed to Musselburgh Union. He went to Musselburgh Union. Then from there he went to a team called Musselburgh Athletic. And it was from there that Hearts signed Willie Bauld. He was on the verge of actually going to Sunderland. But Dave McLean, who was the manager previous to Tommy Walker, stepped in there very quickly and signed him for Hearts, who in turn farmed Willie out to Newton Grange Star. And he was toughened up there a bit in the juniors, and then he come back to Tynecastle, but he wasn't long in the reserves, and they farmed him right away to Edinburgh City, who were a club that played on the then C division in the Scottish football. And Willie became a great star then, and the Edinburgh City fans, who were diehards in their own right for Edinburgh City, idolised Willie, even though he was just a young lad at that time. In fact, Willie Bauld would be about ages with myself. 1948, he would be a year younger than me, Willie. 1948. I was born in 1925, so Willie would be about 18 at that time. And I did brilliant with Edinburgh City, so they brought him, when he was knocking on the goals, they brought him right back to Tynecastle. And they never looked back after that. He just progressed from there.
So why was it that he gained a derisory 3 caps for Scotland against England, Switzerland and Portugal within the space of a couple of months in 1950, scoring a goal in each of the last 2? Part of the reason could be identified on the opposite side of Edinburgh, where Willie's arch rival was Hibs' Laurie Riley, a solid favourite with the selectors, probably because he was an altogether different type of player whose game was built on zest rather than style.
I think he was a sort of loner fella, you know. I mean, I felt he was always happy with Hearts, but when he went away, you know, I don't think he gave Scotland his best. He was still a good player, but I think he was more or less, you know, just felt like he wasn't amongst, you know, you get players like that. I mean, Gordon Smith couldn't play well with Scotland at times either. You get players, you know, and he had great ability. You get players that, you know, that's what happens. But he didn't play well, but he wasn't, I'm saying, I think he missed, I think if they had played Jimmy Ward with him and that, you know, of course this is what happens, you see. You get a stranger and you play with somebody, you know, and this is what happens. But I think, you know, that they were that good, the three of them, and plus, you see, they were getting plenty of the ball, and the game was flowing, and all of what it's doing nowadays. I mean, when you have maybe 39 stoppages in a game, that's what's happening. But, you know, the game gets stopped, the referee, everything's all... Aye.
They had not won a major trophy for 48 years when they faced Motherwell in the League Cup final of 1954 at Hampden. But Hearts won 4-2 with Willie scoring a hat-trick and capturing most of the acclaim when the team returned to Edinburgh.
Hearts in dark jerseys kicked off at Hampden Park, and Johnston of Motherwell was soon in action. It was the Tynecastle side's first semi-final since the war. Motherwell, who knocked out the Rangers, gave as good as they got. In a Motherwell attack, goalie Brown came out to save. A tussle in the goalmouth followed. Then a hefty charge bowled Brown over, and the ref had to cool down some hot feelings. Hearts opened the scoring. Rutherford shot, but the ball was deflected for a corner. From the corner kick, the ball rolled towards the goal, and Conn put it in to give Hearts a lead of 1-0 at half-time. Resuming, Motherwell went all out to pull the game out of the fire, and there was some fine football. Here's a grand Motherwell attack which only just failed when Kelly's shot skinned the goal. Here's the shot. With Hearts trying to increase their slim lead, it was a needle game. Here's Rutherford again. Johnston missed, but it was safely cleared. Then came Motherwell's equaliser. A little lucky maybe, but well deserved. Inside left, Watson fired in a shot which hit the post. Mackenzie tried to save, but the ball seemed to bounce off him into the net. There were no more goals, and a draw was a good result in the afternoon's grand play.
Willie Bauld was pushing towards the prime of his career when, in 1956, Hearts won the Scottish Cup by beating Celtic 3-1 at Hampden, with 2 goals by Ian Crawford and another by Alfie Conn. Willie's most valued work of the competition had been in an earlier round against the old firm's better half, Rangers, at Tynecastle. Hearts won 4-0 that day, with the King claiming 2 of the goals. Riley claimed many of the caps, which might have been Bald's, although the Tynecastle centre-forward lost more still because of a catalogue of injuries, which, as the Hearts programme once testified, ranged from rib to toe. That famous toe injury, popularly referred to as the Big Tay disaster, struck in the mid-1950s, by which time Willie had made possibly his most spectacular contribution to Hearts history. But he wished he'd done more to help them win the championship for the first time in the century, in 1957-58, when they lost only 1 match to Clyde and scored a record number of goals, 132.
The cup final with Celtic.
Well, we were underdogs to start with, you know, but we felt we were never underdogs, because I felt that in fitness alone, you know, we went there that day, and the support that was there, I'm talking, when you're talking 132,800, and there were a lot of neutrals, you know, and we felt that, you know, it was our attitude to the game, the mental attitude that got us, and we were the fittest team, and it was a brilliant game, you know, it was end to end, but we felt that when the goals come, but it was a great occasion, you know, and 54 when we beat Mull and all, you know, in the League Cup before that. And I think the more victories you get a bit of confidence in yourself, you know, that nobody better than us, you know, it's a mental thing. When I say you don't do your talking to the press now, you do it on the park. You know, you hear the boys saying, oh, what we're going to do with this team, and then it turns the other way. I think in our day we were more quieter. And we had confidence in ourselves to believe in the mental attitude going to the park. And that's the big thing, you know.
Celtic in hoop shirts kick off against Hearts in the Scottish FA Cup final at Hampden Park. Celtic have the ball. John Cumming intercepts, but Celtic retrieve it. Celtic attacking before the Hearts goalmouth. The defenders get the ball away, but Celtic are soon pressing again. Hearts right half Dave Mackay fails to stop them. So does right back Kirk. But Kirk chases after the ball and manages to deflect it over the line. Now a Hearts attack. Alfie Conn loses it. Jimmy Wartaw gets it away. He's impeded, but Mackay comes to the rescue. Alfie Conn races to beat the Celtic defence. He gets through, passes to Ian Crawford, and Crawford slams it home. Second half, with Hearts battling to increase their 1-0 lead. A quick tussle, and Celtic managed to clear for the moment. But centre-forward Willie Bauld soon brings it back down the left wing. Bauld centres. Young and Fallon jump, but Crawford's there, and it's another goal for Hearts. Celtic have got their work cut out if they're going to catch up now. They sweep down on the Hearts goal. Goalie Duff drops it, and Mike Horney scores. Hearts 2, Celtic 1. And now Hearts are taking a corner kick. Goalie Dick Beattie jumps. It goes to Ian Crawford, who shoots wide. Goal kick to Celtic. The ball goes loose, and Hearts kick upfield. Willie Bauld beats Bobby Evans. Alfie Conn shoots, and Beattie can't save it. Hearts 3, Celtic 1. And that's the final score. It's 49 years since Hearts were in the final. On that occasion, it was Celtic who beat them 3-0. Hearts have had to wait for half a century to get their revenge. Now, at last, it's theirs. And so is that precious cup.
What's your fondest memory of Willie, in a match?
Well, I think when we won the Scottish against Celtic in 1956, him and with a good forward line. It wasn't just what they call the terrible trio. With wingers, they could get the byline, and I think they gelled well. This is the thing. They had a great understanding, and I think I feel like the game was open in these days. Everybody had the talk about overlapping fullbacks. We had a big outside, well, he was an outside left. Tom McKenzie was a left back. When we played Hibs, Tom McKenzie actually played Gordon Smith. If Gordon Smith was a fullback, he went by him and get the bylines. But everybody covered for one another. This is the difference. Somebody went, you slid into, I think we played in sort of triangles, and I think it was a lot easier to play, and I felt like that's why I think the games. I'll go and watch it, as you say, but Willie's strength was in the air, but he was still strong, his physical side of the game was, they could do anything with him, and the more they kicked him, I think Willie get stronger and stronger, plus, it was somebody to give him a boost. But he's really a marvellous, player, but he had a great gel with Wardo and Conn and the teams, when the teams played with wingers, and I think it was, I think the game was open all the time, and there were none of this, the game never gets stopped. It was always flowing, no stoppages, really.
Well, I can remember the 1956 Scottish Cup final at Hampden when John got injured, and everybody thought he shouldn't be on the park at all because the blood was streaming from his forehead. But this day and age he would have been off the park, but he decided he would play on, and that was John Cummins. You would have needed to break his legs before he'd have given up playing. But he went on to he was left half that day, but he went to the outside left position to finish the game, as it were, holding the sponge to his head. But that wasn't John. Things weren't going that way in that left wing, so he reverted back to left half, and that never worried him. No.
What about the time you played with your head gashed open?
It's one of these things I've been used to getting knocks and things like that, and I was actually going for the ball, and Willie Fernie, I was getting up, and I was coming down, and Willie was getting up, and they got him under the eye. I got 4 stitches under Ken. It was just the timing, but it didn't. In these days you went off, and the sticks me, and I come back on again, Ken. But it didn't worry me. Blood was nothing. That's how I feel about it. I've always had knocks and things like that, and I've played with knocks, and end of the day, the trainer come to me on Friday and say, how do you feel? I'm all right. And he picked me because he believed in my, that's what you did on a Friday. Maybe you had a couple of injuries and you're getting treatment and that, and then he'd say on a Friday, how are you? So I'm fine. And that was good enough, for...
You used to collect Willie on the way down.
That's right. I used to go in the Lang Huang. I used to go in an hour before my time. I used to leave Crook about 7 o'clock when I got a car, and I used to be there at 8. Well, we didn't come in at 10 o'clock, but I used to go into the gymnasium in the morning, do work up. But Willie, because Willie was, Margaret, he was just getting up out of bed when I was getting to Edinburgh, and he'd come down the, you know, this is true, he'd come down and he'd come down the stair half asleep, you know, and Margaret would give him his tea, and that was his way there, you know. You wouldn't ruffle him. And I used to get in and I used to say, you'll need to be early in the morning because I went up the stair to do my training, because I used to go into the gym and do, you know, a warm-up. But you wouldn't ruffle him, you know, he just, that's his way, but oh, he was a personality in his own way, you know, and he was a great player.
He was the victim of injuries once more that season, and the fine play of younger men like Alec Young and Jimmy Murray further ensured that he was used quite sparingly by manager Walker. The king was not for abdicating, though, and his crown was still firmly in place the following season when he scored twice in Hearts' 5-1 pummelling of Partick Thistle in the League Cup final. Hearts' terrible trio had begun to break up by then, Alfie Conn having gone to Raith Rovers, with Jimmy Wardhorse soon to follow him to Fife by joining Dunfermline. But Willie Bauld endured, and while he missed the third of Hearts' League Cup wins of that era against Thurlanark in 1959-60, he claimed a historic goal in a 4-4 draw with St Mirren, which saw them finish the same season with another championship title.
How do you honestly think the terrible trio compared to the famous five?
Well, I felt that we'd a better, we always, very seldom Hibs beat us, you know. I mean, nowadays I'm told I've got medals east of Scotland, and they could never really, very seldom they beat us. You know, I think the difference was, I think the likes of myself and David Mackay, wing halves, were the main, that was your, you know, what they call the strength of your team, feeding these lads, you know. We need a good forward line, no doubt about it. But I didn't think they get fed the same way as our boys get fed, because Davey and I were always getting a grip of their inside forwards, no to bother about us, you know. So, you know, I think they get more service. I mean, and Hibs were brilliant, they were brilliant, but I felt they didn't get enough service. Of course, this is what the game was about in these days, you know, feeding wingers and space. And at the end of the day, I felt that was the difference between the two teams. I think we had a better balanced team, you know, from the midfield. And when we went to win the cup now, Bobby Dugan, who played with Hearts, he was a brilliant footballer, but he didn't suit our, you know, Bobby for Glasgow, he didn't suit our let's say he was holding on to the ball too much, you know, and the ball wasn't coming fast enough to that front man. You know, I mean, this is that again. But I feel that was the difference with the Hibs, you know. I mean, they'd wing half right enough, but Davey and I like to attack. If Davey went, I sort of made a lay back, just like, you know, you sort of pivot. So you balance your setup. And I feel that was the difference. We used to feed the forwards, we used to kid them on, you know, just that get the ball up quick. If Jimmy Ward would come back, he'd come back just too far back, and I used to hunt him, you know, up my road. Because that's, I said to him, say, if you're 20 yards away from me, say, I'll feed you. You know, and this is you talk to one another as if you're, and that was the difference, I think, with a great blend.
Remember, I would think the best Heart team I ever seen would be Brown in goal, Bobby Parker at right back, Big Tam McKenzie at left back, Dave Mackay right half, Freddie Glidden centre half, and John Cummins at left half, Tommy Sloan outside right, Alfie Conn inside right, Willie Bauld at centre, Jimmy Wartaw inside left, and Johnny Urquhart at outside left.
These reminiscences form a colourful outline of Willie Bauld's career, the more minute detail of which included such feats as a hat-trick in the first representative match he played against the Irish League in 1950, a subsequent appearance for the Scottish League, this time against the League of Ireland in 1958, ended with his claiming 5 goals. Such was the King's celebrity in Edinburgh in those days that the conductor on the tramcar which trundled along towards Tynecastle would ding his bell and shout, "Willie Bauld, stop!" Youthful footballers on their way to play at Meggetland on a Saturday morning would stare reverentially at a certain terraced building in the area and whisper, "That's Willie Bauld's house." Scottish football, arguably, has not produced a better loved player than the man whose name evokes to this day the most respectful discussion, even amongst those who never saw him in action. His appeal went much deeper than his deeds on the field. The man had style as well as skill. He had charisma, if you like, although such a tribute probably would have embarrassed him because he was also a man of modesty.
Well, just because he was such a brilliant player and a nice lad too, with it. I mean, he never sought the limelight, Willie Bauld. He seemed to be of a quiet disposition. And many other players sought the limelight at that time, but never Willie Bauld. You never heard of him, I did this and I did that, you know. Never. He always kept very, very quiet. And I think that's how the people respected Willie Bauld, just because maybe of his nature. He might have even been a bit of Tommy Walker rubbed off on him, you know, and that's no bad thing. But they just seem to take to the hearts of the people. And going back to even his old Edinburgh City days, who are now defunct, it was adored by even the Edinburgh City, and it followed on to Tynecastle. And it was just brilliant. He was a brilliant player.
Well, see, the youngins don't know much about him, you know. You go to these supporters thing and see the older people, you know, I mean, they're still, you know, going to the games, but the young fellas don't, you know, I'm talking about, they don't know much about him, you know, but it's going back the years when he played, it's we've a lot of Hearts supporters all over, you know, I'm talking about Craig Miller and Dalkeith and all places, and he used to turn up, and 53,000 at Tynecastle in the days, you know. And it's older people, the young fellas will ask me about Willie Bauld, and you know, and it's hard to, you know, for them never to be able to see him, you know, this is the thing. I think if they'd seen him, you know, in a video or something, you know, I'm talking about if he'd been alive today, and everything about him, you know, he's that good in the air, and if somebody ruffled him, that was the main thing. Whenever somebody ruffled Willie, he got his dander up, you know, and he could sort them out.
Do you think he compares to any modern day players?
He's above any modern day players. I think he had that much strength, Willie Bauld. You know, his strong body, and he could lay off ball with the head, and he could, you know, everything about him was really, he had a great touch. I mean, you were playing with centre halves at Willie Woodburn, big fellas in the days. Well, Willie was only about 5 feet 7.5 or 5'8". He maybe wasn't be that, but yet in the air he could. But nobody could handle him, you know. I'm talking about centre halves. Well, it was Willie Telfer. He wanted to, you know. He just had a natural, and the more you dug him, the better player he was, you know. But
what do you think Willie's own happiest memory of his spell at Tynecastle would have been?
Well, I think Willie, when he went on tour, Willie Bauld was, you know, he was very relaxed, and again, everything was all gelling together when we were playing, gone in South Africa, Australia, and all these places, and there were people coming to visit him that had been from Edinburgh and went out to Australia and places like that, and you thought it was back in Edinburgh, you know, it was, you know, I mean, it's a thing that he'll always be remembered, you know.
Gordon Smith, when he moved from Hibs to help Hearts win their second championship, used to remark upon Willie Bauld rushing to check the team list of a Friday to see if he was playing the next day. He never took his place for granted. Alfie Conn described him as being the brains of the terrible trio, and another contemporary, Alec Young, described him as completely two-footed, and added that while he may not have been a great dribbler of the ball, He had superb vision and was, of course, outstanding in the air. Opponents were no less fulsome in their praise. An old adversary and contemporary of Laurie Riley's at Hibs, Eddie Turnbull, saying, "In my book, Willie was supreme, a super player." Unlike our own Laurie Riley, who was sharp as a tack and never stopped moving, Willie was more the playmaking type who led his line well. Turnbull testified also to Willie Bauld's superb ability in the air, and the old Airdrie player, Dougie Bailey, commented, "Bauld was the first player I can remember. Dennis Law was the second, who could jump and stay there until the ball came across. His timing was so good, unbelievable really." But one of the most touching and telling tributes to Willie Bauld came after he retired, in the form of a letter of appreciation to the Daily Record newspaper, from a former Rangers centre-half, Willie Moles. He recalled a match against Hearts in which Rangers had pushed into a 2-goal lead, and added, "Hearts were out of it until a long ball was played through the middle to Willie. I started to go for it, then hesitated when Willie ran in the opposite direction. By the time I got going again, the ball had passed me. Jimmy Wardhoe had bounced up from nowhere and scored. Hearts were into top gear then and won 3-2.
Hearts were into top gear by then and won 3-2. The salient point Willie Moles saved for later, saying that the critics blamed my inexperience for the loss of that goal, but I prefer to think it was down to the genius of Willie Bauld.
I think his biggest strength was in the air, you know, but he was strong, you know, he was built like a gorilla, you know, I'm talking, you know, really powerful. And he could hold the ball in the air like I've never seen any player do. You know, he was up there and his timing, everything was there. I don't think there were a better header in Scotland. I mean, I've seen English, but in Scotland I think he was outstanding. And he was quite strong, you know, even at running short distances and that. He wasn't what they call a long distance runner, you know, he was more or less, which all you needed in these days, 5 yards away from somebody, you know, but
Various newspaper critics of the time used the same superlative to describe the fated Tynecastle centre-forward. Among them Jack Harkness, who, after a glittering career with Hearts, wrote for the Sunday Post. Reporting an Edinburgh derby in 1955, which Hearts won by 5-1, Jack Harkness testified, "Hibs were on the end of 10 top-notchers and a genius." That genius, of course, was Willie Bauld, who scored twice in the match to give his side the biggest win over their Edinburgh rivals since the Second World War. Other critics, like Tommy Gallagher, the former Dundee player who went on to write for the Courier newspaper in that city, described Willie merely as being brilliant. Hearts fans were lyrical about him, singing, "There's a team in bonny Scotland, their colours are maroon. They have the finest centre that Scotland's ever known. You can talk about your Rileys, your Buckleys and them all, but you ought to hear the roar go up when Willie's on the ball." Willie Bauld was on the ball until the spring of 1962, when, at the age of 34, and in spite of hints that he might be offered a coaching job at Tynecastle, the newspapers carried the stark announcement that he'd been given a free transfer. He accepted his lot, philosophically enough, saying, "I suppose I'm a bit disappointed about being released by Hearts. Mind you, I have to admit that I'd expected a free transfer for about 3 seasons." Willie spurned a few offers to continue his career elsewhere, and a testimonial match against Sheffield United was arranged in his name for the November of that year. It duly attracted a crowd of 15,000, the kick-off having to be delayed for a couple of minutes whilst the King, wearing a soft hat for a crown, took his bow in the centre circle. The proceeds amounted to around £3,000, which was a considerable sum in those days, enough to buy a house maybe. Sheffield United's expenses had to be deducted, likewise the police and catering expenses, and infamously Willie even was charged for the cost of the match ball. Thus he was left with around £1,700, and a grievance which was to linger for the rest of his life and likely to prevent him from ever returning to Tynecastle.
Well, the testimonial game, you know, I mean, when I say that, I mean, he went the wrong way about it when I was telling you, you know, I mean, Ken Howie, the ball, he didn't ask the trainer anything for the ball. You know, I'm honest, I don't want to, and if he'd asked the trainer would give him 2 balls, or he gave him a jersey. Instead of that, he'd lifted the ball and away with it, you know, and nobody knew what happened. But, you know, it's one of these things, you know, and all you need to say to John Harvey, you know, give me a ball, give me a strip, John Harvey would have given him it. But just the way things happened, the ball went amiss, and so what do, you know? But it's, you know, there are a certain way, but that was Willie's sort of, you know, Ken, it was nasty that, I just felt that it was due this without. Oh no, I mean, I got on well with him, and he was a brilliant player, and these things didn't worry me, but I felt like, you know, all right, it isn't wrong, you know, I mean, if I'm talking to you that it wasn't wrong, so at the end of the day, they're all saying, you know, to me, and I just tell them I don't want it, but I'm honest when I'm telling you so now.
Willie Bauld. Well, not knowing so very much about it by that time, as I had the income to live in Glasgow, and I didn't have the same opportunity to follow Hearts, but having played so well and for quite a long time with Hearts, I don't think Hearts gave him a very good deal at all, because well, they gave him a testimonial, but they took all the expenses of that testimonial off of Willie, and instead of coming out with maybe saying, well, say for instance a figure of £2,000, Willie only come out with 1,500, which was a lot of money at that time, you know. And I don't think the Hearts director were very good to Willie Bauld at all. I really don't think so. I thought he didn't get a good deal. And strange as it may seem, but Hearts were a wee bit tight in many instances. Even the great Tommy Walker didn't make an awful lot of money out of Hearts, and others. I mean, there was one great wing half, the previous wing half to John Cummings, to the great John Cummings, was a chap by the name of David Lane, who was a fantastic wing half. Well, he left Tynecastle because of a dispute regarding money, and it was, I think it was something to do with bonuses.
Oh, I think when Alec Young come on the job, you know, I think Willie had a sort of, you know, he'd taken a sort of, you know, Alec Young was a good player, you know, and Alec Young could play anywhere. You know, he's played outside right in our game and all, and he could play anywhere like Gordon Smith. I think Willie, he'd taken a wee bit, you know, just childish, you know, this is my word, childish, you know, just sort of, he wouldn't accept that he had to fight for his place, you know, and there are players like that, and Willie's nature was that was his nature, sort of, he accepted it, and that was the difference. Alec Young was you know, he was a gifted player with, he floated about like a gazelle, you know, he was a lovely mover, and I think when Alec started to go into centre forward, the sort of, this is what happened. And I knew Willie well, and that was what, you know, really, if it had been a bit of a boy that, see, this young fella is not got my place yet, which you get people doing, they're going to battle you. But I think Willie was quite happy, he's sat on his sidelines and more or less. But it was his character and that. You know, I got him, I think he was one of the finest centres I've played with, you know, and I think he was just more or less, he gave up the ghost when somebody young come in and, you know, Alec was gifted.
I think today, you know, the management we now have at Tynecastle, insofar as we've got quite a great lad now, as far as the Heart supporters are concerned, with Jim Jeffries. It would be great to think that they would, even at this day and age, try and contact John Cummins and Dave Mackay, bring them back to Tynecastle in an advisory capacity and instill what they instilled into Hearts teams in previous years, and that they would be world champions again. I think so. That's my opinion, because the spirit of these two lads, Dave Mackay and John Cummins, they never gave up. They never said die. And but the way both of them got treated, I mean, Dave Mackay got transferred. To this day, I'll never know why. But that just seemed to be the way the Tynecastle board went at that time. And it's very unfortunate that one should have to say that, because there was a great camaraderie at the Tynecastle in these days. And bearing in mind that Tommy Walker was manager then. So, and I don't think Tommy was wanting the players treated in that way. But the board were all powerful. So what they said went. And even the great Tommy Walker left Tynecastle very quietly at the wind-up.
Seems to be a bit of a pattern. I mean, Willie Bauld, we know about the testimonial and things.
Yes.
After the testimonial, Willie really had nothing else to do with the club. How did you feel about that? Did you feel he'd handled that correctly, or?
I think so. I think so. I mean, for what he had done, you know, the glory that was at Tynecastle at that time, the atmosphere that was created, bearing in mind that in these days, when I went to Tynecastle, 25, 30, 35,000 was quite common on a Saturday afternoon at Tynecastle. So the way the players were treated, I mean, the board couldn't have been displeased at the money that was coming through the gates every Saturday, because the place was packed. And that went on for many, many years. And why they should treat great servants like that, I just don't know. I mean, there may be reasons for it, but I mean, Tommy Walker would come on the board of directors, but even after that, Tommy slipped away from the board.
Those of us who knew him only from the terraces of Tynecastle remember Willie Bauld for being so generous with his skills.
In fact, he did return, some 12 years later, when his nephew was mascot at a match involving Kilmarnock. Jim Cruikshank, the great Hearts goalkeeper of the time, was to recall the occasion vividly, saying, "We were sitting in the dressing room preparing to take the field when we heard this almighty roar from above. We couldn't understand what was happening until somebody came in and told us that Willie Bauld had just appeared. I think he put thousands on the gate that day." Willie sat in the director's box next to his old captain Bobby Parker, who of course was on the board by that point. Pat Stanton of Hibs testified years later that he was about to take his place in the same area of the director's box when a hand tapped him on the shoulder and a deferential voice advised him, "That's Willie Bauld's seat." Willie Bauld died in 1977 when he was only 49.
I don't know how he died. What happened?
He choked. He was just, you know, he choked. He just getting dumb.
Very young.
Aye, a young man. Jimmy Ward was the same actually. Jimmy, aye, he was the very same. It was sad, aye. But Willie was quite a heavy smoker, you know, and his tongue had, aye. But
was there a big turnout at his funeral?
no, aye, big, aye, oh, there were a big turnout. Jimmy Warders and all, aye, oh, they were well, you know, they were dedicated.
Jimmy Wardhaw, then a journalist and sadly drawing towards the end of his own life, was asked by many of his old Tynecastle teammates to pen a tribute to the man they called the King. But he chose not to eulogise the footballer whose gifts were treasured memories by then. Instead, Jimmy remembered the man and wrote, "Willie was a quiet sort of person, but always found time to talk to a youngster on the street, encourage a new signing, or chat to an old-age pensioner who just wanted to say he'd spoken to Willie Bauld. He was always fun to be with, for he had his own brand of pokey humour. Above all else, he was generous, as his many friends will testify." Those of us who knew him only from the terraces of Tynecastle remembered Willie Bauld for being so generous with his skills. We hurried along to the ground on a Saturday to see a man who, well, apparently never in a great hurry himself, contrived, nonetheless, to be ahead of the game rather than behind it, dictating so much of the action, providing so much of the excitement. Lesser players with a more artisan-like approach to the game hurried here, scurried there, dripped beads of sweat, got their shorts muddied even. They were the commoners of football. Willie Bauld carried himself like a king. He was the king.
I well remember the first game played at Tynecastle following the untimely death of Willie in March 1977, when a minute's silence was held in his memory. The silence was total, the silence was complete. Prior to the start of the second half, as the ball boys emerged from the tunnel to take up their stations around the ground, from my seat in the stand, I watched a lone figure emerge from the crowd at the Gorgie Road end, make his way down to the retaining wall and beckon to the approaching ball boy. Leaning over the wall to speak, the elderly gentleman opened his coat and handed to the boy a bunch of daffodils. Whereupon the young lad trotted up the park towards the centre circle before placing the flowers exactly on the centre spot, the very spot on which the king had reigned supreme during all those wonderful years. This simple, humble and anonymous gesture exemplified the esteem in which Bauld was held by all who had known him, spoken with him, or merely seen him play. No player in the game then and since has been more revered than Willie Bauld, a legend in his own lifetime, who greatly enriched the lives of countless people, and who, with his teammates, in that golden era, gave a sense of achievement and fulfillment to the lives of tens of thousands of us lesser mortals.